Ali Azim from Ali Azim Services. Actually, it started early 2020, and the Feb and the mid of March when the people witnessed, a kind of catastrophe, a destruction around the world in the form of the COVID. The COVID started at the start of 2020, and the Australian borders, they were forced. The Australian government was forced to close the borders. The Australian aviation stopped the planes, and it was very tough for the students to move on. It was such a hustle around the world, including Pakistan, including Australia, including Canada, UK, USA, around the world, that the outbreak of the COVID-19 corona, that was the biggest tragedy in the history of human being. And you see, such a huge number of the people are impacted by this COVID, and all the countries, 75% of the countries get affected by this pandemic, or it's really a hard time for the community around the world. Along with that, the student community suffered a lot, and I know it was the last night of the flights. Australian closed the borders, and it was the last night of the flights. Three or four my 3 or 4 students, they traveled all the way to Australia. But it was not in the minds of the people, back in the minds of the people, that the Australian borders, the closure of the Australian border is going to last for years. You see, once again, we are going to have the Feb after 1.5 months, but still the Australian borders are closed. But let's assume, what kind of things happen in 2020. In 2020, biggest tragedy that the world faced was a pandemic, and the COVID-19 pandemic, coronavirus, stopped the world economy, stopped the travel association, stopped everything in the world, including the traveling of the students, admission ratio at universities that went down pretty fast and significantly, you said. And when it comes to the 2020, the students were in two minds whether they should apply for the visa or not. Some of them, they had already applied the visa before the borders closed, and their applications were in embassy or DHA. So they got the visas very late because it was very hard for the Australian government to plan out the things, to make strategies on the borders opening. So if there were no borders opened, then who would have traveled? And that's why they, created the delays in their visa processing. So 2020 has been, it's gone now. You see that after 2 or 3 days, we are going to witness the 2021, the year of the hopes, the year of the anticipation, the year of the progression of the world once again. You see that many types of vaccines have been introduced around the world, and the vaccine immunization has been started in UK, in USA, and 5 of the vaccines have been picked by the Australian government as well, and two of them have been rolled out, and including the Queensland vaccine that was rolled out, and they said they're not going to use that, and rest of the 3 vaccines have been approved by the Australian government, and right from the Jan, they are going to start the vaccine immunization amongst the people of Australia. Now, the conclusion is that if you are looking forward to get Australian education, international education, actually, this is the time to apply for the visas. I know that some of the people, they are still in between, they are still in two minds, and they're still between the sky and the earth, whether they should apply for the Australian visa or not. Look, if the borders are not opened by the Australian government, they've already been facing the $39 billion loss in their economy. The trade doors with China, already closed, and the Chinese students are no more in Australian territory. So overall, you will see the greatest disaster in educational economy and the industry of Australia if they don't open the borders. So that's why what I assume is that the Australian government will take international students in parts. So they will start taking students from Darwin, then South Australia, then Western Australia, then New South Wales, then Victoria, and they are going to take the students state by state. That's what I assume, being an education consultant, and I can assume that using the different sources, in Australia, in my land of the world where I exist. So I believe so that 2020 is going to be the year of your success once again. The spring has really come up with the same speed it was suppressed. So the spring has to come up in 2021. And if you talk about the 2020, the spring that was pushed down by the pandemic, by the COVID-19, but right now, let me tell you that the same spring is getting up pretty fast in a dramatic way, and you are going to have the advantage of the international education. And that's why this is the right time to apply for the visa. This is the right time to apply for the Australian visa and get Australian visa. That's what I say. And that's why you need to apply for the Australian visa. And this is how you can make your future brighter. If you do not apply the visa in 2021, means you are creating the gap in your education, because the Australian authorities, they have allowed the online education. If you do not apply right now, it means you are creating gap in your education. So once you're creating gap in your education, it shows you are not a genuine student. GTE, genuine temporary entrance, is an important part of Australian visa. So if you're creating gap in your education, you're not applying right now, it will create gap, and visa officer can ask you that you are not meeting the GTE requirement and your visa can be refused. So that's why this is the time. Apply the visa, get the visa, and if the borders are not open, get the one-time deferment till May or June or July, and this is how you can do the things better. Thank you very much, Alizine. Keep smiling, and time to say you goodbye. But start applying the visa for Australia. This is my advice.